Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study entitled Recommended Reading, and I would like to recommend that you read the book of First Thessalonians, Paul's first letter to the Thessalonian church. Both letters are wonderful. They're written close together, and therefore reading both of them would be good for the reason that I'd like to offer right now, and it is this. Paul wrote First Thessalonians within weeks of him being in that city. Therefore, it gives us a wonderful glimpse into what Paul's teaching was like when he first planted the church in a locale, in a certain city. We know from Acts chapter 16 and 17 that Paul was called by the Holy Spirit to go to Macedonia. He had not intended to go to Macedonia, but he got a vision of a man from Macedonia saying, "Come over and help us." And so he did. He went to Macedonia, taking the gospel for the first time that we know of into the continent of Europe. I suspect there were already churches in the continent of Europe based upon the scattering of Christians who were there on the day of Pentecost. They certainly planted a church in Rome, and it was probably already there. But anyway, historians often call this the first congregation in Europe. So he goes, these were the first congregations in Europe, I should say. So he goes to Macedonia. He preaches to 3 towns there. The church of he goes to Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea. You'd think if the Holy Spirit would tell you to go to a place that you're going to go there and you're going to spend some time there. Well, he doesn't spend some time there. He's not there very long. He's there for a little more than a month at Philippi before the Jews get upset with him, and he goes to Thessalonica. He's at Thessalonica for a few weeks, and then the Jews create a mob violence against the church, and then he goes to Berea. He's at Berea even a shorter time, and then he gets bounced out of Macedonia altogether, and he ends up in Achaia, and he ends up at Athens. And they planted 3 congregations that they're worried about, that Paul is worried about. And he writes about this in First Thessalonians. And so what he does is he stays by himself in Athens, and he sends Timothy and Silas back into Macedonia to check on these congregations and to firm them up. And it is Timothy's return that has produced the writing of First Thessalonians. And it is very much a love letter that he has written to this congregation that is so young in the faith, but that is already so strong, even though it's only, 2 months old, 3 months old, and yet they are already an example for churches everywhere. And so we can tell from reading First Thessalonians the kinds of things that Paul got done as of primary importance as he planted a church in those first few weeks, because he was only there those first few weeks. And we get a picture of what a strong church looks like. Those congregations in Macedonia were the jewel in Paul's crown, even though they were planted under such duress, even though he got to spend so little time there. You know, he was 6 months in Corinth and 2 years in Ephesus, and neither of those congregations did as well as Thessalonica, Berea, and Philippi. They just didn't. I mean, in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, beginning with verse 1, he's bragging on those congregations to the Corinthian brethren, and how concerned they are with the welfare of all Christians, and how they give beyond their means. And of course, both the Philippian letter and the Thessalonian letters are love letters from Paul to these congregations who bring him nothing but joy. And that's what we read about in First Thessalonians. And I want to recommend First Thessalonians chapter 1 specifically, because in his greeting to this congregation, in this report card, this A+ report card that they get from Paul after their first grading period, after Timothy has come back and made his report, we find out what elements they have that make them a successful congregation. We find out, first and foremost, they're truly converted. Everyone reports about them, the way they have turned to God from idols to serve a living and true God, and They were an expectant congregation, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, that is, Jesus, who delivers us from the wrath to come. They were imitators of Paul. They did good works. They prayed. They loved. Those are the elements of a successful congregation, whether there's persecution or not, whether they have a church building or not, whether they have eldership or not. These are the elements that are mentioned in chapter 1 that are expanded upon in the rest of the letter. These are the elements that they have that make them, at this early time in their history, a successful congregation. And you get to hear a lot about what's going on in read a lot about what's going on in Paul's heart, about how, he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, when he's talking about all the hardship he's endured, how many times he received from the Jews 39 lashes, how many times he was stoned, how many times he was robbed, shipwrecked, left for dead. And then he says, but the worst part is the worry I have for all the churches. That's what he says. And we see this here because he says, I couldn't take not knowing how you were doing any longer. I sent Timothy to go back and find out. Now he's come back. Chapter 3, now that he's come back, we're so happy. What joy I take in you. How can I give God enough thanks for the joy that you brought me? And Paul's just so honest about the way he feels about these congregations and these Christians. And they have repaid that care, that love, that emotional investment by being the congregation that he planted. So it's the polar opposite of the letter that he wrote to Galatians. And this may be the first letter he wrote. I don't think it is, but it could be. And it's such an important letter because it's so close in time to the few weeks that he was at Thessalonica that it gives us a window into the way he planted a church and what he taught a congregation that he planted as of primary importance. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. Next time, we'll stay in Macedonia and talk about the letter to the church at Philippi. We'll see you then.